Live, and I'm just going to check my page as usual, make sure it's gone live, and then away we go. So today is special, Mr. Cox. You've been telling me for weeks about we should be doing some property stuff. So I'm going to let you take the lead on this one because you've been asking me for some time.
Mm-hmm.
So this week's Accountability Monday is about property and how we can hold ourselves accountable in the property world. So how you been anyway, John? Have you been all right? I think you're in Portugal.
Yeah. It's all good, really. I think there's some good. I think there's some data, quite a bit of data this week on inflation. So I think obviously we need to factor inflation into account. There's talk it's still going to be sort of, it's not on the bridle yet, as they say. It's just over 3%, I reckon. But I mean, if it comes in on a 2, that'd be quite nice. 2 point something in the late twos would be quite encouraging.
Yeah, I think there's some inflationary pressures that might keep it above the 3 yourself, but
you've got the minimum wage and the living wage and all that, but that's obviously that kicked in on the 1st of April, so that won't flow into the system. So I can see, personally, I would think inflation will come down, and then it might go back up a bit.
Maybe. Yeah.
But there we go. But I suppose the property market. I saw the Halifax had reported a 1% drop in property prices recently.
Okay.
So that's on the agenda. We've got lenders obviously still in their rates accordingly. But I think the momentum in the property market was there to begin with in sort of like late December, January. But I don't know, what are you experiencing? Because I think the agents are definitely sort of quieter.
Well, I think it does depend on the stock. So if we're talking from an investor's perspective and what I do as a trader's perspective, I think that is excuse me, I've just had something coming up saying okay. From my perspective and what I'm being told is that agents are struggling over a certain price bracket. So people are very nervous over but the lower end and the stuff that needs modernization, which is the stuff I'm buying, there's still plenty of demand for. So I think that it really does depend on where that price bracket lies, on whether the agents are busy or not. And I was doing a bit of research with one of my clients today, and we did a central Birmingham was nice and firm. We had over 50% of the market sold. Go the little outskirts of Birmingham, and it was more like 30% sold. So I think it's very area specific and very price specific as well. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty. We haven't got that really mad market that perhaps some people thought we might have. So it's very uncertain at the moment on what's going to go on. And I think it's just everyone sitting on the fence. It's, I've had this conversation with you and many people before. We're not going to see a collapse in property prices, regardless of whether interest rates remained high for a little while. And the reason being is the circumstances are very different this time round to what they were in the last 2 times where property was vulnerable. It's not vulnerable now because people have borrowed money against an asset and they've got a lot more skin in the game this time round. So the general property market will hold up. And even with the jump in costs as far as mortgage are concerned, there's still flexibility and elasticity in the market, in people's mortgage payments. Everyone that's taken a mortgage out in the last 15 years has had to have a repayment. So they've got that flexibility to dip down into interest only if need be on an emergency basis. And I think the inflation with wages has probably helped take the sting out of it as well. And I think rates have settled compared to what they were 18 months ago. So I think overall, it's the best we could hope for, really, at the moment.
Yeah. So do you think the market's going to be like this for the rest of the year? Then obviously, I mean, all we've got to do is
I think it'll
exclude
be very much.
geopolitical or world events, because obviously the world's a bit of a funny animal at the moment. If we take a big world events, I would say
There's
it's pretty.
a lot of geopolitical things going on, which I think make people nervous. That's uncertainty again. What's going to happen? Is it going to cause a bigger conflict than it actually is? Who's going to step in? So there's a lot of we had this conversation before. There's a lot of voting going on this year across the world. There's lots of elections going on, and there's a lot of uncertainty with that. And I think all them things put people to sit on the fence. And I equate it probably to very similar times to 2016 when we voted to leave the European Union.
100%. Yeah, I see that. I see there's definitely a lot.
If you look at the data from that time, in 2016 and in 2017, you saw a dramatic drop in transactions. And a lot of people sat on the fence, and they sat on the fence for 3 years because a lot of people just waited to see what was going to happen with us leaving the European Union. And once we left on the December 19, even though we had the pandemic years that followed that our exit, we had lots of people that had been sitting on the fence came out and started buying. So I think there was definitely a reluctance to buy, and I think we've got that reluctance to buy at the moment, and that's all it is, a reluctance to buy.
So obviously, you know, for those people that don't know, you've got a sort of a very unusual strategy. I mean, it's very, very well thought out, but it's unusual insofar as you buy from estate agents and sell through auctions. And obviously, going back sort of, I suppose, 3-4 years maybe before the tax change. Well, yeah, probably before Section 24 hit the landlord. And then obviously you've got the interest rate rises. Your end user, or the person you're selling the property to, was a landlord, I would say.
Yeah, I think it all changed in 2016. You had the double, triple whammy really. You had stamp duty changes in 2016 on the 31st of March, so the 3% was introduced, and then and that year I think it was the first. I think it came in waves, didn't it? It came in over a course of a couple of years, and it started then. So you had a lot of uncertainty, and people were their cost base was higher. And then they knew that the taxation was going to kick in. So we changed our business model then, because we didn't want to rely on the buy-to-let punter. Because I will say this, and it sounds quite detrimental, but I'd have bought anything with a front door and a roof up until 2016, as long as I knew some buy-to-let punter could get a mortgage on it. And that was the way the market was up until 2016. Once that been and gone, then we had to change our buying strategy and say, well, who's our end user now? Who's the one that's going to buy it off of us as a trader? And so we decided to change tact, and that was we'd buy a decent house, larger properties, not what I call your buy-to-let fodder at the time, which was a 2 up, 2 down, and a sort of central city centre location. Especially like outside of London, places like Medway, places like Luton and Bedford, and them sort of places, and anywhere where there was lots of chimney pots, and the buy-to-let brigade had hoovered up most of the stock, and that was a stock. It's interesting because that was the stock that the average first-time buyer would have purchased, and that average first-time buyer turned into an average renter, because they couldn't get the mortgages. So they needed somewhere to live, and the buy-to-let brigade hoovered them up and then rented to people who couldn't get mortgages. That's going to change, by the way, I think, in the next year or so, 2 years. The people who've been renting will start to buy now, because you can now get mortgages where if you've been renting for the last 10 years, you're paying every month. that'll be your affordability level, because obviously if you've been paying that amount of mortgage rent, and then that's your affordability measure, and they'll give you a mortgage for £5,000 deposit, you know. So and most people can get their hands on £5,000, £6,000, as opposed to 25 or 30, which other buyers have had to put their hands on. So that will change. What else was I going on about? Yeah, so I think so once the buy to let that sort of unit, they weren't buying that anymore. Now, if you think about the strategy for investment, is very geared towards HMO, serviced accommodation, and
that's what I was going to say.
So we're buying the bigger units that we would not necessarily just sell to an investor, but would sell to a family or a first-time buyer ourselves, because we've got a wider market. Whether the HMO buyer will pay as much as someone owner-occupier would pay, and we're starting to see in the last sort of 3-4 years owner-occupiers entering the auction market to buy off of us as well, which is a risky thing, because we've seen more transactions fail to complete because of auction conditions. But saying that, they're in there, they are buying, and we've seen more of them owner-occupiers buying off of us than investors. So the landscape has changed dramatically when it comes to auctions and traders and investors. And I suppose the question would be is, what's the next phase? What's the future hold for investors? Because it's uncertain with interest rates the way they are. Do you buy a limited company? Do you buy in your personal name? You know, and then people go down the limited company, and as you know, trying to get a mortgage for a buy-to-let with a limited company, they want belt and braces and collar and cuffs, the whole lot. They want a debenture on your company. They want a personal guarantee. They want a bigger deposit. They want a higher interest rate and probably a higher fee. So it's going to cost you more to buy it in a limited company, but you'll pay less tax. So, you know, don't weigh this up. And do you buy? And also, from what I can understand, get a buy-to-let mortgage is a standard, straightforward buy-to-let loan nowadays because of the risk element. And the other thing as well is, if you've got a potential government change, is there going to be regulation changes? And I think there will be. I think regardless of whoever gets back in, or if there's a hung parliament or whatever there is, I honestly believe that in the future we are going to start to see more regulation come in. I don't want to say rent controls, but there's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot harder to rent properties out. They're really hard on landlords now. And I will say that, as much as most landlords and investors won't like me saying this, rightly so, because they've got away with a lot. Some of the dodgier landlords have got away with a lot of stuff in the last 15, 20 years. And it's them few landlords that have given the general landscape a bad name. And that's the reason why they're slapping landlords, because of the unscrupulous ones out there. So you're going to see more regulation. I think rates will settle down with the buy-to-let market. But if you only know this because you're a mortgage broker, right? As well as insurance, you if you think about the way that lenders were attacking the buy-to-let market, they were the golden child for a long time. They loved buy-to-let up until 2016, 17. They changed their tune because they knew the taxation laws were coming in, and they knew that you know, they could probably absorb the higher interest rate, but you put the taxation on the top of it. It was a double whammy, wasn't it? You know, it's huge extra costs for landlords now. So they're vulnerable as far as the lenders are concerned. And how do you mitigate that when you're an investor and you're trying to build a portfolio, or even keep your portfolio alive? You know, because there are some investors out there struggling to spin the plate and keep the lights on, so to speak, as you know yourself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, obviously you've got different markets, haven't you? You've possibly got, you know, old-fashioned landlords that are were in the sort of like family household model that obviously brought in their own name. And they are, obviously, I would think they are exiting the market when it suits them. They have to time it, because they've got capital gains tax to pay, etc., etc. But you've also got people that are, pivoting, that can't get it to stack as a family. Like, take something, I mean, I know it's the Lake District, so it is a holiday area, but it just proves a point. If you've got a 3-bed property, a 3-bed rental in the Lake District area, you'll probably get £12,000 a year renting that to family. Or, if you put that as FA accommodation, that goes up to £36,000 a year. So, and that house price is still the same house price. So obviously that takes more and more stock away from families, which so I mean I think
won't last long, John. Won't last. You watch the down on it. They're going to come down on it really hard.
They are starting to already, and I think they will attack it. But
it reminds me of like the it's like if you go to Islington and you go to Notting Hill, if you went there 60, 70 years ago, it was bedsit land. And they cleaned that up because it was dreadful. There were dreadful areas, 70 years ago. Islington was a no-go area, so was Notting Hill. Do you remember the Notting Hill carnivals? All the aggravation we used to have down there. It's a very different landscape today because they brushed the areas up, and it will happen again. They will stop this. You cannot. I'm sorry, but I know this is going to upset a lot of landlords. You cannot keep putting loads and loads of stock into the rental market on rooms because one house produces 6 rooms. Well, if someone's got 6 properties coming on the market, that's 6 is 36 rooms in a very short space of time. So you flood the market very quickly, and then you'll end up with the undesirables in some of these places. And I remember in the 80s and 90s when I was an agent myself. HMOs were a fucking nightmare, and they'll become a nightmare again if they're not careful because you're just oversupplying it, and you can't keep oversupplying that marketplace. You cannot do it.
It's quite funny, isn't it? So my heart would agree with you because I've never really liked the HMO model because of the exit strategy on it. Because if you take a typical HMO, I mean, obviously it depends where you're investing, but some of these people that are putting together HMOs, they might be buying something for £250. They might be doing £100,000, £150,000 of work to turn it to a 6-bed. And then some people will try and get an investment valuation, which I'm a bit sort of no-no on that because it's still a 6-bed house. But obviously some people will try and make it sui generis or something like that. But so that asset, so say you've created an asset that's effectively valued at 600,000, you wouldn't sell that to someone else at 600,000. So you're tied to that asset. I mean, it's fine if you're always going to keep it, but so I mean so I've always been very, very sort of muted on the HMO marketplace. The only thing I would say is that it's shown so much resilience, and it's also got quite a lot of subsectors. Before, you've been around the block a few years like me, but if you go back to the HMO, it was almost like DSS tenants and students.
Well, it's probably going to go back that way because there is a big demand for social housing because of the influx of people coming through or crossed on the channel and boats. You've got asylum seekers. You've got what's the other ones they call them? I can't remember what they call them now.
Economic migrants, or
no, there's not so much there, but you've got asylum seekers and you've got refugees. That's the other one. So there's masses of because when you had freedom of movement from the European Union, you had plenty of people coming in and out all the time. And they were free movement, and they could go and settle somewhere. You didn't have to process them. This time around, they're all coming through illegally. They have to process them somewhere, and then once they process them, they're going to have to get them out of these expensive hotels because they're just putting them in nightly rates in hotels, and they're going to have to push them somewhere. So there will be lots of HMOs swallowed up in that area, but what sort of state they're going to be in, and what's the condition of them, and how it's going to play out, it will be a very different kettle of fish. And there is, and I was talking to an investor the other day, and I said, look, be very, very careful where you invest, because you only have to go on spareroom.com and do a search for rooms in that area, and then in that same search, put searching for rooms, so you can search for people looking for rooms and people renting rooms. And if you've got more rooms to rent than you have people looking, you've got an oversupply. If it's the other way round, you've got a good area to rent in. And I think the more affluent areas are probably better for the HMO, and the quality of people looking to rent. You've got people who are probably blokes are getting divorced. They leave in the family home. They need somewhere to live. They can't get another mortgage. They've got no choice but to rent a room somewhere. So I think there is a demand for certain types, but you've got to be careful where you invest. I think there is a concern long term that there'll be an oversupply.
That's interesting. It's interesting. So obviously the auction market, because you sell, a lot of investors buy through the auction, whereas obviously you're selling through the auction, which I think is a really smart move, because if you bought something today and tidied it up, or even if you just bought something privately and then you just wanted to bung it to an estate agent, the chance of that concluding within 4 months is probably about right. So you're waiting 4 months, you're holding that asset for a long, long time, whereas your strategy is basically you're using that delay on your buy cycle, and then obviously you're putting it to the room and getting rid of it within 20 days. But you've been doing that for years and years and years now. But obviously, COVID has changed the auction metrics, because obviously there's no rooms anymore. I think one big auction company tried to do a room, didn't it? It was a bit muted, but everything's online. It's sort of like electronic, and so how has that impacted on the market? Do you think in a positive way?
I think it's swings and roundabouts. I was talking to an auctioneer the other day, and he used to love the room, and he used to rinse the room, and he'd go, you're going to lose it for 500 quid. Whereas I think that's fine when someone really they've come to buy it. But I think the online auctions are very much an easier transaction for some people, because they're not intimidated by the auctioneer. They sit behind their computer, and because all these, you've got two types. You've got the live stream where you've got a rostrum and a guy who's banging the gavel, looking at the screen, or you've got the online sort of what I class as an eBay type auction. But you can't snipe on them sort of auctions either. You can't the last second, because the clock resets. So when you've got a rostrum auction, it's similar to a main room, but the auctioneer knows if someone's hovering over the bid button. And I think Andrew Bimstock does it on a regular basis, and he'll say, Mr. C, I can see you hovering over the button. Go on, another £500. So you can combine the two. But the numbers are strong. They are very strong, and the amount of stock that's going for auction is vast compared to, say, 5 or 10 years ago. There's a lot more stock going through auction, and the auction is a good place to buy if you want to buy a quick. It's done and dusted. You haven't got to mess about bidding people up and then someone messing you about and you haven't bought it. Hammer falls. I mean, you might pay a little bit too much, but at the same time, for sellers, it's a great place. It's done and dusted, and so I think it's a good way. And I think the costs have escalated in auction. That's what people have got to be prepared about, because you've got the auctioneer charges a fee, and most vendors who are putting their properties in auction will stick in a little fee as well. I was only saying to a little forum the other day, someone was saying about there was a really cheap property in auction. You can pay 10% on top of its purchase price, its stamp duty, fees, and all the bits and pieces, without even, before you've even completed, it's cost you 10% extra. So you've got to be careful. But I think I like the auctions. It hasn't stopped us from trading in the auctions the way it's done. And I do think, because the online clickable online auction, i.e. where it's just like similar to eBay, people have got time to get their calculator out, do their numbers before the next bid comes up. So I think it can help achieve a better price because someone doesn't feel intimidated by the auctioneer.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, very, very good. And so, what would you say the market is? You know, if it was where would you say the actual UK property market is right now? Would you say it's still a buyer's market? What would you say?
I think it depends at what price bracket you're at. It really does. I think you could, if you were in the executive level,
sub 300.
Well, sub 400, I think it's still really strong. Anything over 400 grand, I think is struggling. That's outside London. Inside London, I think London prices have softened a great deal, and I think that that 1% Halifax stated. You've got so many different variables. Yeah, the best one to look at, if anyone wants to see what's happening with the market, is to look at the Rightmove price index, because that gives you a real-time actual what's happening with prices. If people are reducing prices, it will tell you that prices have dropped or have increased, and there's so the average will be X. Look at that average and see that average each month, see if it's going up, down or sideways. And you always get a flurry of increases around this time of year. Don't forget, you've just had Easter. You're coming into the springtime, which is traditionally a good time to sell. So we should see a lot more activity in the next few months. But it's going to be very, very, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Different times of year. Summertime will be quiet.
Seasonal
is the word. Seasonal. It's very seasonal.
World Cup on this year as well. Is it Euros on this year?
I'm not sure. But these are the things. So if people are savvy, they can buy value today. Definitely buy value. You're not going to nick anything. You're not going to steal anything. You might one or two, but you're not going to. I think it's now is the time to find good value, and I don't think I've seen many people out there desperate to sell. I think people want to sell, but there's no one desperate enough. If you do come who's quite keen to sell, then you will see a dip. But I was looking at something today where someone an investor was selling. It was a ex-HMO. It's Article 4 area, but it had planning for a HMO, been used for HMO for years and years and years, and it had been used as a growing farm, for
cannabis.
And she'd had enough of it, and she'd reduced the price by 75 grand over 3 reductions, which suggests, someone's quite desperate. But when you look at the house, it was priced by the agent because he thought it's a HMO, everyone's going to want it. Well, the HMO investors aren't stupid. They're not going to overpay for something, and it's only worth its bricks and mortar value, really, even though it's got planning. Unless you've got a big queue of punters to come out and buy it, and it needs a lot of work doing to it, and that's half the problem, is trying to get a mortgage on it prior to your end mortgage, because it's in poor condition. There's going to be a limited amount of buyers for it, hence the reason why it was never worth the extra 75 grand in the first place. So, and I need people to understand the asking price is not necessarily the value. Just because someone asks something and then reduce it doesn't mean to say that was its value and I bought it underneath it. It was probably never worth that in the first place. Otherwise, it'd have sold.
Yeah, instead of BMV, you should have AMV or something, actual market value or something like that. You have to create a new one. The Ribbons valuation.
I used to call it below someone's opinion, BFO.
Oh, yeah. So we're nearly coming to the end. A couple of things, right? So as a property trader, when have you done the best? Have you done it in a boom time or in a weak market, strong or weak market?
I think this is one of the hardest of times in one respect, because you've got to get the price right to sell it, but you want to try and buy at the right price to buy in to make a profit. So it's finding the stock in at the right level is difficult unless you know what you're doing. Unless you've really got an insight and you've been taught exactly what to look for. So I think there's opportunities there. There's no question about it. It's uncovering them, which is the key, and that's what we're good at. We cover them opportunities on a regular basis. But when it comes to selling it, I'm a little bit more nervous because I don't know where the market's going to take me when it comes to actually selling it at the end of it. So I think there's caution is required. Caution.
Interesting.
I mean, the best time to do it is when the market's collapsing, but we're not going to see that for some time. So it's
I was going to say, I don't know what external factor is going to cause that, really, because
well, I've got my view. I think that lenders are going to start lending, and their criteria is going to drop, and so you'll have lax lending over the next couple of years as they search for trying to find more borrowers to lend to, because at the moment the numbers are well down. They're not attacking that buy-to-let market anymore. So the first-time buyer is going to become the new darling. And as we know from whoever released that $5,000 deposit the other day, more lenders are going to go down that route. And it's the lax lending that will cause the next mini boom. And following that will be probably a dip in prices, because it's that if you look at the markets crashed every single time there was lax lending. Because
so I mean, I mean we are overrunning, but I mean I could talk to you for hours, as you know. But I mean, obviously the lenders, typically not lenders, estate agents. I mean, and I would say 90% of first-time buyers, they want sort of like a done-for-you property, don't they? They can't see past all the crap. I mean, it very much like a lot of them don't want to do the work themselves. They want to walk into the property fully done up, hang their clothes up in the wardrobe. So I suppose the opportunity there is the estate agents will be taking those properties on and selling them. They go flying out the door like hotcakes. But the ones that are the refurb ones, which the first-time buyers won't want to touch, that's your opportunity to get them off the estate agents and get them to the auction.
I do think that the next a lot of deals will probably come from the lesser, the higher geared landlords that need to sell, who won't be able to sell them with tenants in them. They'll have to get rid of them, or if they sell them with the tenants in them, they're going to sell them for a lot less. Someone's going to get the tenant out, refurbish it. Like when I say refurb, I'm talking about just the tosh up, because most of these people are living in them, so it's not that bad. So it's a gentle light refurb, and they'll go back on and they'll be buying them. First-time buyers will be buying that stock. I think that's where the next little opportunity is. You won't be making fortunes, but you'll be making, a good sort of like a 5 or 15% out of some of these little deals, and I think they'll be worth it because it'll come round in a circle. You watch it; it'll come round in a circle, and people start buying again instead of renting. And I mean, I got out with times because I thought it would happen a lot earlier than it did, but there've been other external factors that affected it. And the biggest issue, and a lot of people will probably shout me down for this one, I think the crypto market could cause a banking crisis, because now crypto's established, banks will start lending on margins to buy crypto, and that is too volatile. And eventually, when it does slip back, you could find the banking crisis kicked off from there. That's my future prediction. That's not that for a good few years.
No, well, loads of people to hang their hat on the property side of things. So, and if you're at loose end on Sunday, there is a bit of, you can actually spend the whole day with Mr. Ribbins in the south. So if you wanted to come and learn how to trade like a pro, head over to Find It Flip It.co.uk. Just a sneaky little plug there.
I think we can. I think I can stick that in the poster comment. Paste. Oh no, I can't do it.
It's Sunday, Bull Hotel, Jar's Cross. But if you go over to Find It, Flip It, it tells you pretty much all about it there. So there's a couple of spaces left, and yeah, it'll be a good little group that's learning all about how to buy from estate agents and put to the room and make,
Yeah.
well, what was it, your last deal grossed 47,000, didn't it? Which is quite sweet.
47,000 it was, between buying and selling. So, and that's we've had quite a few of them that sort of level, and I'll explain that how we found them. And that was actually quite again, it's knowing what to look for. There's little indicators we look for. There's 3 questions I always ask agents that reveal deals, and because we want to get them deals before they even hit the market, or the timing is crucial. So if you can get them, and I'll teach people how to do that, how to find them little gems, how to talk to an agent, because most of the people I see talking to agents don't know how to talk to them, and they end up pissing them off, and that's years and years of experience. You don't get to the level I'm at, 800 odd, nearly 9. Where I've lost count of how many deals we've done, but it's substantial amounts, and we there's a formula we use. We've been using it since 1997, still works today, and I'll teach people that formula on how to find something for enablement, and then you'll be able to tell them how to fund it, and we'll show you people how we can fund it for them if they need to. And then the last thing is that it's literally how you present it to auction, and how to get the best possible price and milk it for everything we can get, because you can't leave it to chance.
No, sounds good.
So if people are there, I'll put the in the comment section on the numerous platforms. So you've got the link, and you can book for Sunday. There's a few spaces left, and I'll see you at Gerrards Cross on Sunday the 20th. All right.
Brilliant. Great
All right. Well done. Thanks.
Catch you later.
Speak next week.
Yeah. Catch you later.
All right.